invitation and also now for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to see so many people online, and I thank you so much for joining on Friday night. I assume it is now, at least evening. So I will tell you a couple of things about CERN and what we do at CERN. And as it was just mentioned, I'm hoping that we will then get a lot of questions that I hope that we can then answer all of them, or at least that I can answer some of your questions and give you new questions afterwards, because that's how we learn, that we afterwards have other questions. So I will quickly share my screen, right? And I will start my presentation. So I'm hoping that you now see all my slides. And if there are any problems or any questions during my presentation, feel free to interrupt me at any point. If something that I explain or tell you doesn't make sense to you, well then send your questions or interrupt me immediately if that's possible, because I really want to make sure that what I tell you makes sense and it makes sense to everyone. So I'm hoping you see my slides now, I entitled my talk CERN and the Higgs boson and what's next. So I do want to give you a little bit of an information of what we do at CERN, but also about the future of CERN and particle physics. And on my first slide, I want to start by telling you what CERN is, because without that, there's no need for me to continue talking. So CERN, the name is an abbreviation, or it's an acronym, and it stands for, as you can see on my slide right now, Conseil Européen pour la Recherche Nucléaire. No worries, this is the only time you will have to hear me speaking French today. You can translate that into the European Council, or maybe even the European Center for Nuclear Research. So that is our name. It's quite an old name by now, because CERN was founded more than 65 years ago. And that also means that the name itself by now is, how shall I call it, maybe a little bit outdated. So you will see throughout this presentation that we are no longer the European Council. We are already worldwide leading in our research field. And our research field no longer is only, in big quotation marks, nuclear research. We are really doing particle physics at the forefront of our knowledge. So CERN is really worldwide leading, but I will tell you what I mean by that in a second. Maybe just to start with, because I don't want to, bombard you with definitions. Maybe just to have in your minds, what does CERN do? What do we do at CERN? There are four main things that we have to do, and it's easy to remember them because you can use the name of CERN, CERN. You can use each of the letters for one of our four main missions. So you see on my slides, the first one is international collaboration. So CERN is an international collaboration where a lot of different countries come together to run this laboratory. So international collaboration is number one. Second is education. So education at CERN is really, really important. It's the most important thing we do at CERN to make sure that the research continues for the next years and decades. So that's why a lot of PhD students and postdocs are at CERN to learn what we do and then take over from the people who retire. Of course, fundamental research, this is what we do. We conduct fundamental research in the field of particle physics. And the cool thing about fundamental research is that it always leads to new technology. Because if you do fundamental research, you constantly have to develop your tools all the time. And we construct new accelerators, new detectors. And in doing so, from time to time, we never know when and what will happen, but we invent some technology that is not just helpful for our research, but also for our daily lives. I mean, I assume, or maybe not, but I assume some of you might know that the internet, as we call it these days, so the World Wide Web, was invented at CERN. And that's the reason why we now can have this session today together, because at CERN the internet was invented, but it was never invented back then for us to have video conferences or to look at cat pictures on our phones. No. In the beginning, it was really just invented to transfer data from one computer to the other. That's what we called the web. And only over time it became the World Wide Web that we now call the internet. So this is one aspect or one example for new technology that came out of fundamental research, but there are plenty of other examples, and I will tell you throughout my presentation. All right, let me briefly tell you the history. I don't want to bore you too much with history, but of course I want to tell you where CERN is coming from, and then we will jump immediately into the present days, and then we look at the future. So CERN, the organization, was created, well, officially we were created in 1954, but the story already started earlier, around the year 1949. Back then, the Second World War finally was over, but unfortunately Europe was more or less completely destroyed. It's after the war, the situation in Europe was not a good one. And that meant that all the researchers who had worked in Europe before both world wars actually, they were either unfortunately killed or they had to emigrate into the US or some other places. And so there was no research going on in Europe after the Second World War. And we also saw that the atomic bomb that was successfully developed, but you see me doing a lot of big quotation marks around the word successfully, because the atomic bomb was developed, and we could for the first time see that this nuclear energy that until then was really just an idea or a theoretical idea, but we saw that it's really real. But of course, it destroyed too many lives, so it can never be called successful from a general perspective. But from scientific point of view, it was a scientifically valid point that we could see that nuclear energy is real. And so that's why after the Second World War, a lot of very important scientists suggested to create a laboratory in Europe for three reasons. The first one is to help rebuilding Europe after the war. Second, to bring the researchers who worked in Europe before the war, to bring them back and have them work closer to their homes. And third, to investigate this nuclear energy, but not to create a bomb or any other military requirements. It was really clear this is a project to conduct fundamental research and to make sure that it's really not a war project or a military project. You can see on my slides in 1952, we brought in UNESCO to guarantee that this is really a research project, and we got this very nice slogan, which is called Science for Peace, because CERN is really this beautiful organization. We are not just conducting research, we are also bringing together countries, have them collaborate, and really show that if you really focus on science and not, on other conflicts, so that you can really work together. And so that's why we are quite proud of the slogan that was given to us at the very beginning, and we still hold on to it dearly. So Science for Peace is really important at CERN. Then in 1953, the CERN Charter was signed. The CERN Charter is essentially our birth certificate. So you can see it on my slides, but I don't expect you to read anything on that because it's way too tiny. And but I can tell you that these are the 12 founding states. So there were 12 member states that founded CERN, and these are Germany, Belgium, Denmark, France, Greece, Italy, Norway, the Netherlands, Great Britain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the now former Republic of Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist. It's split up into different other independent countries now. So these were the first 12 member states that founded CERN, and they were all they all agreed to create CERN. So that's why they signed the CERN Charter. But on behalf of each of the countries, these were scientists who signed on behalf of the countries. And of course, that was not legally binding. So that's why next to every signature, if you can see that, if you read that, yeah, you can see the sentence subject to ratification. Which means that the respective countries had to ratify that, and that's why it took another 1 year. But then in 1954, CERN was officially founded. So this is essentially the history, how it happened that CERN came into existence. I told you the names of the countries that you see on this CERN charter. So it starts with Germany, then Belgium, Denmark, and I'm not sure, but maybe some of you might have the idea or the question, why were those countries listed in this way? So why Germany first? Why Belgium next? Why Denmark? And this is a very nice example of how CERN operates. There is no reason for the listing of the countries except for the alphabet. But now you might be wondering, wait a second, the alphabet, that does not work because we have Germany, Belgium, Denmark. I mean, that's not how the alphabet works. You are right if you think like this, but it's the French alphabet. So CERN, we are located in Switzerland, in Geneva, where our official languages are English and French at CERN. And this contract was written in French, and that's why all the countries were written down in the French language. And so that's why Germany in French is Allemagne. So it starts with an A, and that's why Germany is number one. And the reason why I tell you the story is, if you were to sort these countries according to, the number of inhabitants or the money they bring to the organization, you would automatically create some, I'm not saying fights, but you could trigger some discussions, let's call it this way. But the alphabet, everyone accepts the alphabet. And that's exactly what we at CERN also hold on to. All those countries, they are different, of course, and there were different people from each country at CERN, but they all have the same voting right. They all vote with the same power, which is one. So they all have one vote if there's something to be decided. And to make sure that all of the countries are equal at CERN, we just list them alphabetically. That's what everyone accepts, and that's it. So you see, that's how this organization functions. All right, but now let me show you how CERN looks like today, because the first 12 funding states that we had, this whole thing evolved, of course, over time. And by now, as you can see on my slides, we have 23 member states and another 9 so-called associate member states. This is one of the, don't get too confused by the names. What is the difference between a member state and an associate member state? This has to do with the history of CERN. As you've seen, or as I told you, we are called the European Council of Nuclear Research, because in the very beginning, we were really a European organization. And that's why in the birth certificate, in the CERN charter, it says this is an organization of European countries, which at the beginning made sense. But by now, we don't want to be limited to Europe. We want to be as global as possible. And for example, if you look at India or Pakistan, who then wanted to join, it was legally not possible because the CERN charter said European countries only. And then we, invented the associate member state category, and now they can be a member as well. So don't worry too much about the names. The important thing here to see is that there are now more than 30 countries who run this organization. And by running, I also mean they provide the funding, because, in these days, you always have to talk about where comes the money from. And our annual budget, I put it on my slides, it's about 1.2 billion Swiss francs, which you can transform into 1.1 billion euros or 1.3 billion US dollars. But we don't get all three of them. We only get once. It's just to give you an idea of what Swiss francs is compared to euros or US dollars. So roughly 1 billion, whatever currency you want, which I think we all can agree is a lot of money. It's really, really a lot of money. I hope, I assume all of you will agree that it's a lot of money. If there's someone in the audience who says $1 billion is not a lot of money, then I would be very interested in getting in contact with you, because that would mean that you are very rich, and then, I would like to get to know you. But I think we can all agree, for us personally, that's a lot of money. Now, the question is $1 billion or 1 billion francs a lot of money for CERN when it comes from so many member states? And here the answer is quite clear. No, it's not a lot of money, just because there are so many countries involved, so that if you divide it over all the member states and associate member states, each inhabitant of the country pays about $2 or 2 francs per year. So that's how we do it, because we have about 500 million inhabitants in the member states. And so if we divide 1 billion by 500 million, well, the end result is 2 francs, which I know is an easy trick, because the moment you divide anything by a large number, well, the outcome will be small. But that's why I put on my slide in the right lower corner a coffee mug, because if you want to memorize it, well, then every inhabitant of the member state pays about 1 cup of coffee per year to provide for the budget of CERN. And of course, we are really happy to get this kind of budget. So don't get me wrong, I don't want to say that it's not a lot of money. I'm just saying, you know, for us personally, as a private person, that's a lot of money. But for an organization like this, we are happy that we have it. But you know, if we were to get more money, we would not say no, please don't. We would take it. We would know what to do with it. All right. Let me focus a little bit on this coffee mug. I'm not sure if you've seen this kind of coffee mug before. It's quite famous at CERN because we sell it at CERN in our shop. Unfortunately, only in our shop at CERN. We don't have an online shop yet, but we are working on that. And so this coffee mug is quite famous because it has this beautiful formula on top of it, which I'm not sure if you've seen it before. It's the so-called Lagrangian. It's a very short version of the mathematical expression of the so-called standard model of particle physics. So with this model, with this formula, we describe everything we know in particle physics. But it's the very, very short condensed version. That's why we can print it on a coffee mug. The original one, which is a little bit more expanded, fills about 2 pages of formula. It's quite difficult. I don't want to, you know, tell you, well, that's super easy, but I do want to point out that colleagues of mine and myself, we wrote a paper where we explain every single term of this formula, and we explain what it means and how it relates to our daily world. This is still a quite difficult paper. I don't want to advertise it as, you know, read this paper and you will understand quantum field theory. That's unfortunately not the case. But if you're interested, you can find this paper. We have a website for that. It's quite simple, cern.ch/PER, which stands for Physics Education Research, because that's what we in our team are doing mostly. We try to explain the things to students, to teachers. And so if you're interested, you can read this paper. It's completely open access. You can give it a try, but I warn you up front, we try to make it as nice as possible, but you know, it's still quite challenging. Let's put it this way. But maybe it's interesting to you. So I invite you to download the paper if you want. You can just click on the website after this talk, I hope. So let's hope you stay with me. All right. So how many people work at CERN and where are we located? I want to now focus a little bit more on CERN. So at CERN, we have about, well, more than 20,000 people who are somehow attached to CERN, and they come from all around the world. So they are not only constrained to the member states and the associate member states. No. They come from almost all around the world, including Nepal. But we have to distinguish. So on this slide, I put some numbers. I just want to mention them, and if you have questions, I will be more than happy to go into detail afterwards. But you know, I just want to tell you. So there are 2,600 so-called staff scientists. So these are scientists who are permanently based at CERN. I'm one of the lucky ones of them. I'm actually a very lucky person because I went through every single contract that is possible at CERN. I'm really very, very happy and fortunate. So 2,600 people who are permanently based at CERN. Then we have 800 so-called fellows. These are usually at the postdoc level, so postdoctoral researchers. Then we have about 550 students. So in our team, we have PhD students, for example, or master students. So we are not talking about high school students, unfortunately, but we talk about university students. And then we have another 15,000 so-called users. So these are researchers who come to CERN for a day, a week, a month, or even a couple of years, and they use our facilities. So CERN is really a laboratory that we run, but people from around the world can use it And of course, I mean, these are not just any people who just knock on our door and say, hello, can I play with your accelerator? No, no, no. These are really scientists who have agreements with CERN via their universities, their institutes, and everything, of course, is well planned what we do, and it's really planned many years in the future, because we do really large experiments. So it's not, you know, I want to play with that. That's not how it works. And so we provide the laboratory for users. So that's a very important term at CERN. And then on my slide, you can see about 2,000 externals. These are, for example, technicians or engineers who are mostly from the local area, so from France or Switzerland. All right. But now what do we do? I mean, I now told you for 20 minutes already how great CERN is, but I haven't really told you anything what we do. So I want to now focus a little bit more on what we do. And at CERN, it's quite simple. We want to answer or get closer to answering the fundamental questions of humankind. And in physics, the fundamental questions really are, where do we come from? Which you might know, when we look at our universe, we see it's expanding. So if we trace that back, we can see that about 13.8 billion years from now, so in the back, there is something that we describe as the Big Bang that happened, and out of which the universe came into existence. So I put the Big Bang theory on my slide. It's not what we investigate, but you know, the sitcom is fun, so I like to have it on my slide. So that's one big question that we have. How did the universe came into existence? What happened in the very first moments after the Big Bang? And we try to get closer to that. The other question is, what are we made of? So this is really particle physics in itself. So what are we as people made of? What is the Earth made of? How can we describe that everything that we like to describe as matter is made of elementary particles that interact via fundamental interactions? So this is really where the standard model of particle physics comes in. So that's what we study. And of course, where are we going? The third question, as I told you, the universe at the moment is expanding. It's really fast expanding. And we have no idea, will it continue forever like this? Will it stop? Will it come back? We don't know. So these three questions, where do we come from? What are we made of? And where are we going? They are really important to us. And I have how shall I put it? I have good news and bad news for you. The bad news are, we have not answered all those questions at all. We have a lot of open questions in each of those three categories. So that's our bad news from the scientific point of view. But the good news are, if you want to, you know, go into a career in science, maybe some of you are interested in that, we have a lot of open questions for you. I think I can say we are very kind. We are very nice. We don't want to collect all the Nobel Prizes ourselves. We leave some open questions to you. So I think that's the nicest way of saying that we really have a lot of open questions. So that's why we are always looking for new students, new people who are interested in studying something related to science, and then hopefully coming to us and helping us solve those mysteries. All right, so where is CERN actually? How does it look like? So here you now see this beautiful picture. You might have seen it before. If not, I will now show it to you because it's just so beautiful. It's a picture taken from a mountain. So the photographer who took this picture was standing on the Jura mountains here, and he or she was looking down into the valley. And then you can see the beautiful Lake of Geneva. So this is the city of Geneva, which is in the south corner of Switzerland, surrounded by France. So you can see the border between Switzerland and France is right here. It's this dashed line that goes across my screen. And here is the airport of Geneva. So this is the runway, as you can see. And then this border goes along here. And so everything in the back of my slides is Switzerland, and is to some extent Switzerland, then France starts again. And everything in the lower part of my slides is also France. And in the very back end of my slide, this very bright dot or mountain in the back, this is the Mont Blanc, the highest mountain of continental Europe. But since I'm giving a talk to an audience from Nepal, I will not brag with our mountains. Your mountains are way more beautiful than ours, so I will not talk about our mountains. But you know, we are happy with our mountains, so there we are. All right, and so CERN itself, there are different areas of CERN in this picture. The main site is a triangular shaped area right here. I'm now pointing with my mouse, so with my cursor. So this triangular shaped area, this is the main site. It says here CERN Møre, because the village around it is called Møre. You see also there's a second area, second laboratory here, which is called CERN Prefse, because the French village around it is called Prefse. That's just the naming. But of course, the first thing you see probably is this big yellow circle that we see on this slide, where it says LHC, 27 kilometers. So this is really the LHC, which stands for the Large Hadron Collider, which is probably what we are most famous for. It's the largest and most powerful particle accelerator in the world. We are really so fortunate we have the largest one, so we can accelerate particles to the highest energies that are possible on Earth. And we are quite proud of it, but of course we are also very famous for it, which is a little bit unfair, because this image that I'm showing you is nice, but it's not the reality. The real image looks like this. Yes, beautiful. Because on this slide now, what you can see is the big accelerator chain at CERN. Because at CERN, we not only have the LHC that you can see in my slides here, it's the largest accelerator here, but we have a lot of other accelerators, because if you want to accelerate particles, you have to do that step by step by using different accelerators that grow in size, because the more energetic or more powerful the particles get, the more space the accelerators need to push the particles around the corner. And so that's why you can see our small accelerators at the beginning, you know, they have some nice circumferences of 157 meters and then 600 meters. You know, these are easy to handle, I would say. They are built on the ground in big buildings, but still, you know, the circumference is about 600 meters. But then when it gets to the larger accelerators, the SPS, for example, or then the LHC, they are really large. I mean, 27 kilometers, that's really large. And that's why we did not build it into a building. We placed this accelerator underground. So it's about 100 meters underground. And that's what we use to accelerate particles. To be honest, I could talk about this slide alone for probably 5 hours, and I could bore you to death forever. I will not do that. We can come back to that after my presentation, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions. But now I want to tell you why we accelerate particles. And the answer is quite simple. We want to collide them. We want to smash accelerated particles against each other, because then in this collision, the energies of the particles are transformed and new particles are created. That's what we do. We smash particles together to create new particles. And those particles we want to measure. We want to detect them. And for that, we need really large detectors, particle detectors. And I have on my slides and now this image, which is quite famous. It's the image of the Atlas detector. We call the detector Atlas. It's the largest detector at CERN. And you can see that on my slides, because in this image, which is not the complete detector, this was still while it was built, we have a technician standing here. And so this guy is maybe, I don't know, 2 meters high at most. So you can see that this whole detector is really large. It's 26 meters high, 46 meters long. It's really large. But as I said, it's not finished in this image. So hopefully this guy then moved out of the way, because then we moved the inner parts of the detector inside, because every particle detector, like this one, is built like an onion. So, I mean, like a very technological onion, I guess, because it has different layers. So there are different layers from the inside to the outside, because if we collide particles in the center of the particle detector, and new particles are being created, well, then they move from the center outwards. And depending on what kind of particle it is, they move through the first layer to the second layer. Some of the particles make it all the way to the end. And so that's how our particle detectors know, the first particle only made it to the first layer, then it was, for example, an electron. If it made it to the second layer, then it was maybe a proton or a neutron. And if it made it all the way to the end, then it was maybe a muon. So that's how the particle detector automatically knows what kind of particle it was. And by moving through the different layers, the particles interact with the particle detectors, of its particle detector, and that's how the detector measures the properties of the particles. Now, how I described it, there's a particle here, there's a particle there. That's not really the truth, because I have to be honest with you, in those collisions, there are hundreds of particles being created. And the thing is, now I'm going to brag with our numbers. We create those collisions every 25 nanoseconds. Yes, so we have about 40 million collisions per second, which is, don't ask me how to memorize that or how to imagine that. That's impossible to imagine, even for me. But we have 40 million collisions every second, and the detectors have to really analyze those particles in no time. So, of course, no human being is analyzing that. That's all done by computers and our detectors. So we are very happy that they do that for us. And again, we can also go more in detail about how that works afterwards when I finish my talk. So I will come to an end at some point, and then we can discuss how that works more in detail if you want. But now I just want to point out that this particle detector that I've just shown you, the main part of each particle detector is a very strong magnetic field. So we need very strong magnetic fields so that the particles interact with the magnetic fields, because then we can measure their properties, so their electric charge or their momentum. Now, in the case of the Atlas detector, as I've just shown you this image, you see those big pipes. And in these pipes, this is where we have big coils of material where we apply voltage to it, and then those coils create a magnetic field, which is quite difficult to imagine how these field lights then look like, and it's also quite difficult how to imagine how it works. And that's why we at CERN, we created a model of exactly this magnetic system of the Atlas detector, which is completely one-to-one replicated in this model, that anyone in the world can build on their own. So you can see here, we took the advantage, we 3D printed all the pieces ourselves. But even if you don't have access to a 3D printer, you can build the same model out of some cardboard and some straws. And then you see here, you just wire up some copper wires. You coil them up. Sorry, that's what I want to say. You coil up copper wires. So you make them into coils, and then you can apply a voltage, and then this model is going to create the same magnetic field as our Atlas detector, but of course on a smaller scale. You don't have to build a 46-meter long detector. That would not be practical. And so we have all the files that you need, either for the 3D printing or for the easier version with the cardboard. We have them available. So again, I will point you to our website where you can find all the material and so many more experiments. All of that is open access. All of that is free to use. And so we designed them for teachers, for students. So if you want to bring the Atlas detector to your living room and show your friends that you are really a true nerd, and nerd is a very good thing, so we want to be nerds, then you can maybe use this model to show them how the Atlas detector works. I let you figure that out on the website on your own, and I invite you to check out the website. Maybe there is something in there for you, maybe not, but check it out. All right, good. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning that CERN, or fundamental research in general, leads to new technologies that come into existence also in our daily lives. And I mentioned the World Wide Web, and you can see here a quite old image of the Google start page, of the main page, because when we switched on the LHC for the first time in 2008, Google was so kind to illustrate that for one day, so that we have this nice image here. But then something that I don't know, but I assume most of us by now use smartphones or smart devices like iPhones or Samsung Galaxies or I don't know what. And we are now using touchscreens. That's usually what we do. And I'm not sure if you know that, but the touchscreen, or one of the first touchscreens, was invented at CERN. And again, it was not invented because one of our technicians said, I want to swipe left and right on my phone. No, 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 no. It was really meant as a control system for one of our accelerators. And this technician invented that on their own time in their home, at home, in the workshop. And he brought it to the supervisor. And then they said, oh, yeah, that's a very nice idea. We are going to install it. And since CERN has we have the job that we make everything available open access. So we share everything with the world because that's how fundamental research works. So this technician then also made the plans for his touchscreen available. And then over time, the semiconducting material that is required, we could make it smaller and smaller and smaller. And now, instead of having the big old touchscreens from 30 years ago or 40 years ago, we now have our beautiful iPhones or whatever smartphone or smart device. And that's all thanks because one technician at CERN said, I want to have a programmable touchscreen instead of all the buttons and knobs. So a nice example of how fundamental research influences our daily works. Or daily lives, and now everyone in our world goes left, right, squeeze, and yeah, you know, that's what happened. All right, and the third example I want to highlight, and here I'm really hoping that no one of us will ever have to use it, but chances are that some of us will have to use it at some point. So these are medical applications, something that as it was in the kind introduction mentioned already, something that I'm investing a lot of my time. So there are medical applications to either detect or treat, for example, tumor cases, so certain cancer cases, where the technology that is used in high energy physics, so at CERN, can be used in hospitals to treat tumor or to detect it. So either for our accelerators or the particle detectors, versions of these are now being used in hospitals, and that's a good thing because with those treatment options we can treat patients in a way in a nicer way than, for example, with chemotherapy, which is still very important to have because there are some tumor cases we cannot treat with accelerated particles. So chemotherapy or, of course, surgery are very important aspects as well. But if you have a chance to use accelerated particles to treat tumor cases, that's always beneficial for the patient. And so this is also something where we at CERN would have never thought about using it in a hospital, but people saw what we did for our research and said, hey, wait a second, if we use this technology in this context, we can use it. And so that's why I'm super happy that I get to work at CERN, because it's an international laboratory, so where different people come together, and that's very important to me, to work with different people from around the world. That's really something I enjoy a lot, and that we provide knowledge to humankind. And if that even then ends up in our daily lives, I think that's exactly how science should work. So that's why I'm very happy about that. All right, so I promised you the discussion about what's next, because I now told you we have the largest accelerator at CERN, the LHC, which is the largest accelerator in the world. But the question is this already the final stage? And here we don't have a clear plan, or we haven't decided yet, let's put it this way, but we are exploring the future, and the future might look like this. And I'm not kidding. On this image, you see the LHC as we have it now. So this is the currently largest accelerator in the world, 27 kilometers. But at some point around the year 2039, maybe, we know that the LHC will be done. So by then we will have exploited the machine. We will have gathered all the data we can get. And if we then want to continue researching at even higher energies or even more precise, well, then we would need to construct an even larger machine, which would, we currently call it the Future Circular Collider. It's a 100-kilometer circumference machine, which of course is not being built at the moment. At the moment, we are just exploring if we could even build this machine. And of course, also if someone can pay for that, because obviously that is not a cheap project. And of course, this is also something that will be built underground, about 250 meters underground. And yes, you can see it will, if we build it, it will go underneath the Lake of Geneva, but apparently that's not a big problem. And so to finish my presentation, I just want to point out what I said a little bit earlier. We have a lot of open questions in science, and we know that there is still a lot of the unknowns out there that we have to figure out and discover. And so that's why we are always very, very happy when we get to talk to students, because clearly we don't want all of you to go into science. We don't want to force anyone to go into science. Obviously, that would be stupid. Everyone should do what they are interested in. I think that's the best case scenario. So if those who are interested to going into any kind of science, I think I would support you in that. But if you see, no, my interests are in medicine, for example, or in arts, or in, I don't know, jurisdiction, well, then I would support you and say, please go in this way. But what we are very keen on is that everyone in the world knows what are the advantages of science and what does science bring for our daily lives. But obviously, if you are interested in going into science, maybe going into the direction of particle physics, then such a project like the Future Circular Collider would be really great news for you, because that would mean there are jobs for the next 100 years, for example, at least. And let me just illustrate how it looks like at the moment in the LHC. So this is this image of the tunnel. So the blue tube you see here, inside of it, this is where we have the Large Hadron Collider. This is where the particles are being accelerated against each other. And you see, if you want to work down there, there are bikes or those electro-scooters, because it's 27 kilometers of circumference. It's really large. You cannot walk there for 3 kilometers to then work there. That would be a waste of time. So we can go down there. We have our access card. We can rent a bicycle, and then we ride our bicycle, ding, ding, in the tunnel. That's what we do. So then we arrive at the station where we have to work. Now, this is feasible for now, but let me just point out where we need so many new scientists, because if we really build the Future Circular Collider, this 100-kilometer circumference machine, you cannot ride your bicycle down there anymore. I mean, you can, but then you have to ride your bicycle for 30, 40 kilometers until you arrive at the location where you have to work. I mean, you are exhausted. So the new tunnel, I have no idea. I found that image on the internet. It's probably from a movie, I assume. We don't know how it will look like, but it can look like this, very fancy. So that means we will need new scientists to tell us how the people underground, if they have to do some maintenance or some works, how they get around. Because clearly, we will not be using bikes. We will use, I don't know, a hyperloop or whatever, I don't know. And that's why I'm so excited, and I'm so happy that I got invited to talk to today to you, because we really need the next generation of scientists and engineers. We also need the next generation of doctors and artists. But if you are interested in science, well, I promise you, we have a lot of open questions for you. And if it's just the question, how do people get around in the tunnel? I mean, we have to solve that question. And so with that, I want to finish my presentation. So merci bien, as we say in French. I told you don't have to listen to me in French, so I just say thank you, merci bien. And if you have any questions, I will be looking forward to all of your questions, and I will be happy to answer all of them. So thank you so much for your attention. And I think I will now unshare my screen again, so I get to see you all again. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Although you were very enthusiastic and cleared almost all of our doubts during CERN, some of my friends still have questions, and they're really hoping if you would love to answer them.
Absolutely.
So I have a first question from Anil Banzari. He's in grade 12, and he questions that back in 2016, CERN announced its NA64 project to understand dark energy and defined a term dark photon as the carrier of dark energy. But what exactly is dark photon, and what is the basic approach of finding the dark photon in CERN?
Okay, yeah. Why not start with a really, really difficult question? Thank you so much. That's a really good question. That's a very difficult question, I have to admit. Because since you mentioned dark energy is, I just want to give some context. So if we look at the universe, we can essentially describe everything in the universe either as matter, that's everything we are made of. Then there is dark matter. There is a lot of stuff, there's a lot of dark matter in the universe, but we don't know yet what it is, but we know it's out there because we see the galaxies moving in a way that does not work with our current understanding. So there has to be some stuff out there. So that's what we call dark matter. For dark matter, we have some ideas what it could be, and we are trying to figure it out. And then since I explained that the universe is expanding all the time, what we like to describe it with is dark energy. So this dark energy means it's moving away. The name dark only means we don't know where this energy comes from. It's not, dark because it's the dark side of the force or something like this. No. It's just dark because we don't know what it is. And so, to be honest, dark matter, we have some ideas and some theories that we are already testing. Dark energy, we mostly have a name. We have a name for it. And so this dark photon now is a hypothetical particle. It's an idea there are different ideas around the photon that could be responsible for this dark energy that pushes the universe to expand. But to be honest, what we are doing at CERN is really just trying to find hints for new particles, such as the experiment that was mentioned, to see if those exist. But we are not there yet to either say, well, whether they exist at all, and we are by no way there to say how it works. That's always the hardest part, to say how it works. We are at the moment just trying to figure it out. To be honest, we have not started with this experiment yet. It's still setting up because that takes a lot of time, and we have not found anything that looks like a dark photon. So that's why it's a very tough question, because it's very difficult in terms of physics, and also my answer is not really making you happy, I assume, because I'm just saying we don't know. But it's the truth. We don't know yet.
Thank you, sir. But although Anil still has another question that he would like you to answer, and the question is that in the LHC, you provide energy of 7 TeV energy to the subatomic particles. But how do you manage the desired velocity? Because there is continuous loss of energy. We need enormous energy as the particle approaches the speed of light as predicted by Einstein's relativity theory.
That is a very good question, and that's another very good question. But in this case, it's a very good question because I get to answer it. It's very good. It is true. So first of all, in the LHC, we do not accelerate subatomic particles. We accelerate protons, and we can call them subatomic as well because they are. Yeah, sorry, I was confused. Perfectly fine. We accelerate protons, and it is true. If we accelerate them, we constantly have to give them energy. So what we do is we use electric fields. So with electric fields, we increase their energy. And it is true, the higher their energy, so the higher the energy, the closer they get to the speed of light. And it is true, we at CERN, at some point, we stopped talking about the velocity of the particles just because it's impractical. So we always talk about their energy, because the speed of the particles, or the velocity, if you want, is in the LHC is 99.9999991% the speed of light. And so you see, it's really unpractical for us. But it is true, it's very difficult to increase the velocity even further beyond this point, because increasing it then to 99.9999992 requires a lot of energy. And so what happens is, as the particles go around in the LHC, and at this speed, they do about 12,000 turns around the LHC per second, so another large number. And every time they come around, they go through the electric field. And every time they come around, they get another push. And that's how we increase, and especially then we maintain their energy. Because at some point when they have their final energy, they just go around and they get a push from the electric field. When my sister, who is not a scientist, asked me how that works, and I explained to her, it's like a kid on a swing, that swings back and forth, and you push the kid once and again, and it swings back and forth, and at some point, if you keep doing that for a lot of time, the kid on the swing gains so much energy that it gets the maximum energy, which goes all around, and every time it comes around, you just give it a little bit of a push so it stays on this energy. But please don't do that with your younger siblings. That's not nice to do with your kids. So, but just as an explanation. Okay.
Thank you, sir. That was really fruitful. Now we have Shreya Banskota, and she has questioned another question. She's also a student of grade 12. Are the scientists working in one of the world's largest organizations, CERN, and you have tackled many nuclear physics experiments and discovered many theories, including Higgs boson. But there may have been some time when you and your team members failed to discover theories. So how did you manage yourself and your members without being discouraged? Also, what is your team working on right now?
Wow. Okay, another very good question. I'm very happy to answer that. Because it is very true. So the first part of the question, how do we deal with the fact that we have a lot of unanswered questions or open questions? On the one hand, I think I can say it is frustrating because obviously we want to understand the universe. We want to know how it works. And if you spend years and years and you still don't know, of course it's frustrating. But on the other hand, that is the intrinsic motivation that drives an organization like CERN. The fact that we don't know keeps you pushing, keeps you going on. But that also means that's why we need a new generation of scientists every couple of years, because at some point people get really annoyed and give up. And so from time to time, I think I have to be a little bit more precise. The Higgs boson was really one of our biggest discoveries already a couple of years ago in 2012. But since then, we had a lot of discoveries. They were just not presented the way they were for the Higgs boson, because the Higgs boson was really, as we call it, the last puzzle piece for the standard model. Beautiful. And since then, we made a lot of breakthroughs in different areas, but they were just not communicated that well. So it is true. Sometimes it can be quite difficult if you don't figure out how things work, but we do make progress. And the most important thing is, especially in fundamental research, part of our job is not necessarily to find new things all the time. Part of our job is to just establish how the universe works. So just establishing what happens if we do this. And so, for example, with the LHC, we collide particles at increasing energies. Things that this is something that no one has done before. So for us, even if we don't find new particles, writing down what happens as those energies is already a success story. And so that is one of the examples, because the second part of the question was, what do we do at the moment? And this is a very tough question because there are so many different research projects going on at CERN. Even it's difficult to summarize them in only a few minutes, but we try to find new particles, that's for sure, and also, for just one example, we have one particle detector that is not placed at CERN, but instead it is placed on the International Space Station. So there is a particle detector that was built at CERN, and then we flew it up to the ISS, to the International Space Station, with a shuttle, and now it's attached up there, and it is measuring cosmic particles. So not the particles that we collide in the LHC. No, it's measuring the accelerated particles that the universe provides for us. And this is also something that we are looking at the moment to see, maybe to have an idea for dark matter and maybe dark energy. But again, dark energy is really, really far away. We leave that for you, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. While you were talking, one of the students from grade 11 raised a hand. So I would like to request Ashwath to please talk to sir and hear the question that he has.
Well, good afternoon or good evening.
Hello.
Uh, I have a question. I have a question regarding the speed of light.
Yes.
So, 90% of the time when we measure the speed of light, we measure it a two-way by taking 2-point speed of light. And in an article that I read, it said that it is basically impossible to measure the speed of one-way direction of flight. So, would you be kind enough to elaborate on that? And why is it so difficult to measure one-way speed of light?
Okay, now I'm starting to wonder what happens in your grade 11s and grade 12s, because these are brilliant questions. I'm very happy to hear that. Well done on your teachers as well. I started laughing when I heard your question, because I happen to have a paper on my desktop right now that I was reading, or I'm still reading, exactly on the topic that you just asked about, the ways, or how to measure the speed of light in two ways or maybe one way. Because there was a paper recently, 10 years ago, where they claimed to measure a one-way speed of light. So what is the problem? If we want to measure the speed of light, the measurement, so measuring the beginning and end point of whatever travels at the speed of light, so let's make it a photon, the measurement happens via some kind of detector, some kind of measurement device. It's not us as humans who measure the speed of a car or a horse or whatever and see, okay, it's running there. It's impossible. So we need to measure it with a device. And this device has to give us the information, what it's measuring, and the fact that this information travels at most at the speed of light itself means that the measurement of the speed of light, of the thing that is moving with the speed of light, is being measured with a device that gives us the information at the speed of light. And so if you think of a photon going from A to B, I mean, that's how we measure the velocity of something. We measure how long it takes to travel a certain distance, and then the speed is distance over time. That's it. So if we want to measure that, we have to measure when it starts. So the photon starts traveling. So we start the clock, and then it reaches the endpoint. But the information when it reaches the endpoint is then being carried back to us at most at the speed of light, because we cannot instantaneously measure when it stops. So that's where this both ways comes in. And I'm currently reading a paper where people claimed that they measured a one-way, where they managed a one-way measurement. But to be honest, I'm not convinced yet if this is really the case. That's why this paper is still quite debated. What I can tell you is that there was, I'm not sure if you know the YouTube channel Veritasium. It's a science communication channel. If you don't know it, I see some of you nodding. That's very good. If you don't know yet, it's one of the best YouTube channels I know. It's one that I enjoy a lot. And so Veritasium recently did a video on the two-way measurement of speed of light that I would highly recommend you checking out, because there they explain exactly and in way more detail and in nicer graphics than me with my hands where the problem comes from. And if it's okay with you, I would point you. I will take the easy way out and point you to a YouTube video. I apologize.
Thank you, sir. Now back again, we have a question from grade 12. Her name is Kajal Bastakoti, and she questioned that how data science is used in LHC, or to what extent is data science used in LHC?
Just to make sure that I understand the question is, how is data science used in the LHC? Or I didn't fully understand the question. The connection was not good, sorry.
Okay. How data science is used in LHC, or what extent is data science used in LHC?
Very good, very good. Data science is probably one of the largest aspects at CERN at the moment. I mean, of course, we are very famous for our accelerated particles, but the amount of data we create on a daily basis, if we are running, at the moment, of course, we are not running, but if we are running, the amount is mind-blowing. I mean, I told you we have 40 million collisions every second, and we throw away most of the collisions or most of the data because it's just not feasible to store all of that. but on average, we keep about 1 gigabyte of data per second. 1 gigabyte, right? I mean, if you think of a hard disk, a standard hard disk, you know, the old school hard disk with, let's say, 500 gigabytes, after 500 seconds, those hard disks are done after 500 seconds. And so every 10 minutes or so, you get a hard disk. And after a day, you have a really high tower. So, I mean, of course, we don't stack hard disks. We have a huge data center. But then, of course, the question is, how do we analyze that? And how do we analyze data in a way that it doesn't take hundreds of years? Because with this amount of data, you really have to be fast. And so that's why a lot of PhD students, a lot of my friends actually, or friends of mine, did their PhD in one of the big experiments, because it's not just the LHC, but of course in the LHC we have a high amount of data. And their PhD projects, where they really spend 3 years on the time, is sometimes really just a small piece of code, of a larger piece of code, where they try to optimize how fast this analysis is being done. And we are really talking about, you know, nanosecond analysis, so that we can get the data out. So this is where data mining starts, for example, but also a lot of effort is done in machine learning. So, you know, PhD students always try to make their lives easier. So they try to write a script so that the machine is learning what they are supposed to learn in a very, you know, rude way. I'm now paraphrasing that. So data science is really is one of the largest aspects at CERN. And that's also why at CERN we have the so-called LHC computing grid, because we at CERN have a data center, but it's connected to about 120 other data centers around the world that all share capacities, because otherwise we would never be able to handle all this amount of data.
Thank you, Fasal. Now we still have a question from Vineet Shrestha, who is also a grade 12 student, and he questions, what would be the applications of particle physics in our daily life?
Okay, so very good question. I mean, there are some applications. I mean, I mentioned the World Wide Web. Obviously, this is something that came out of our research, the touchscreen. But of course, they are not necessarily particle physics applications. That is true. I think the medical applications aspect, so where we use accelerated particles to treat a tumor case, that is an application of our daily life. But as I said, I hope it's not our daily lives per se, because, you know, I hope no one of us gets a tumor. But of course, we as humans have to be prepared for that, because we see that the statistics shows that the development of cancer increases. So we see more cancer cases around the world. This does not mean that cancer gets more aggressive or so. It's actually a good news, bad news situation. The fact on the one hand is people get older and older because our life expectancy is increasing, because our living conditions are improving. But that means the older you get, the higher the chance is that at some point a cell mutation goes wrong and leads to a cancer. That's just how it works. And on the other hand, our detection opportunities, so how do we detect cancer, is also optimized. So we detect cancer earlier and we can treat it earlier. So so the treatment and the detection of cancer, I think, is a clear technology, it's a technology that is in our daily lives. Aside from this, maybe at a border control, for example, where they look for counterband materials, so for smugglers, they also use particle accelerators, because with that you don't use X-rays anymore, you just use particle detectors. It's a little bit easier to handle. So these are just some ideas that I can think of. But of course, there's a whole knowledge transfer section at CERN where we investigate every single thing as to what can be used from our technology. I mean, for example, there's a startup company that was founded by PhD students who did their PhD at CERN, and they were data scientists, and they focused on machine learning, and they said that all the apps to learn a new language, they are all doing it wrong. That's their claim. And they said, if we use machine learning for that, the machine will tell us how to learn a language. And then they created an app where you can now learn French or any language in a way where the computer or the machine knows how you should learn. So just as an example, I'm learning French I'm trying to improve my French with this app at the moment. So I'm hoping I'm doing everything right with this machine learning.
Okay, sir. Now we have another question from the student of grade 12. Her name is Shritika, and she questions, how are science and diplomacy interrelated, and what sort of things you have done in the fields of your interest?
Ah, very good. Oh, thank you so much for this question. Another very good question, and in this case, it goes directly into something I'm myself very involved at the moment. So, science diplomacy is a term that has been around for a long time already, and now it's really more and more people see what's happening, and it's really based on our model. It's really based on CERN's idea that if you bring together people from different countries, for example, to do research. I don't want to, I don't want to paint a picture that everything is perfect at CERN. Absolutely not. I mean, people are fighting. That happens all the time. Where people work, you have discussions. But on a scientific level, disagreements are way easier to handle than if you have disagreements among different countries. And the best example, and I'm sorry that it's sometimes a little bit of a cheesy example, but at CERN, we have researchers from Israel and from Palestine, for example. They work together in the same experiments. Their governments would never even talk to each other. They talk to each other, but it's a really, really high conflict zone. And it's very difficult. But on a scientific level, the researchers are perfectly fine to discuss everything because there are no differences on this level. And so this is where science diplomacy can really help. On the one hand, science is as global as it gets. There is no national laboratory anymore that can really do something on their own. You need to involve everyone from around the world, because it would be stupid not to. I mean, there are so many smart people around the world. You have to make sure you get all of them. And so that's where the connection, where the discussions can start on a scientific level. And of course, ideally, the more you work together on a scientific level, you will then also work together on a national level and, have a better discussion with each other. So that's where science diplomacy plays a big role. And something that I have been studying a lot is exactly this medical applications part. As you can see, I'm quite enthusiastic about that because I really want to make sure that I think people should be as healthy as possible. And if you have the chance to treat really nasty cancer cases easily, we should invest in that. That's my personal opinion. But of course, I'm not going to lie to you. It's expensive. It's way cheaper to do a surgery that might go wrong or might not be very helpful compared to having a big laboratory where you accelerate particles to then treat the tumor. I mean, it's just money is an issue. And that's why we see the advanced treatment modalities, like as I was mentioning, accelerated particles. We see them in Europe, we see them in Japan, we see them in the US, but there is, for example, no such center in the whole continent of Africa, for example. And that's something that I researched, how we can trigger the discussion to get those research or those treatment plans on the ground. But of course, this is down to the money, and then you also need a plan how to do it in the long term. But I make the case that if you do that, if you install such a facility anywhere where it's needed, you automatically establish diplomatic channels and you get to include more people, and then people in the country see, hey, that's interesting, I want to study that. And suddenly you increase the capacity of the countries. And for me, it's really just about educating people. I think the more people learn about things, and again, not saying that everyone has to be a scientist, but the more we are scientifically aware or aware about other disciplines, I think the better it is for everyone in the world. And so, yeah, sorry, that was a long answer, but I'm very enthusiastic. I shut up now, sorry.
No, sir, it's really good if you talk. So me and my friends are really curious about the fact that high school students are given an opportunity to do an internship in CERN, since we heard about it, like 2-week programs. Are we allowed to apply? And if so, are there any sort of criteria or process through which we can apply?
Okay, another very good question. Unfortunately, that's a more difficult one. So you are right. At the moment at CERN, not a lot is going on, because same as everywhere in the world, we are really working from home, and we are hoping that the pandemic eases up at some point. There is indeed an internship program. Unfortunately, at the moment, this is still in its pilot form, and it's only really exclusively for students from member states. And it's running out. It's not even for associate member states yet. So it's really just a pilot that was now, of course, due to Corona, delayed. So unfortunately, at the moment, there are no residential programs at CERN for high school students at all, or at least none where students from so-called non-member states can apply, unfortunately, for now. However, we are at the moment building, or we are starting to build, a really large education and outreach center at CERN. It's called Science Gateway. And part of the Science Gateway will be an international science camp where we will really invite, it's going to be quite competitive, unfortunately, because, you know, a lot of people want to take part in our programs, but we will have a program for students from around the world to take part in I don't know yet the details, maybe 10-day program at CERN. This will be in the future, I would say in 2 or 3 years from now. That is the future. Unfortunately, at the moment, you see, I'm struggling to find words to sugarcoat the fact that there is nothing that I can offer to you. I'm sorry. I would love to, but unfortunately, at the moment, with Corona, anyway, not. But even after Corona, at the moment, it's really the focus is on the member states for now. But since I can tell that your questions that you brought up to me are really on a very high level, and so if there is someone who is interested in taking part or, you know, getting involved at CERN, I can highly recommend. And since I've noticed that you are from grade 11, grade 12, so at some point your high school career will come to an end, and I congratulate you for that already. And then if you study anything, so if you have a chance to go to university and study anything related to science, it doesn't have to be physics. It can be, at CERN we have physics, we have chemistry, we even have, you know, medical physics professionals working at CERN. So if you study anything like this, then there is the so-called summer student program at CERN. So the summer student program is really for university students, again, so usually in the 3rd year of their studies. And here we have certain slots really for non-member state students. This is really, as I said, the main focus is on university students. And that's why for high school students, the focus at the moment is on member states. And we are working on increasing those offers in the future.
That was really helpful, but so I still request you to please send me your contact address in the chat box so that it can be helpful to all of my friends and to teachers as well.
The contact details for what? Or
contact email address.
My email address?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, sure. Sorry, it was just difficult to understand the question. That's very simple. Everyone at CERN has their own email address that is composed of first name dot last name at cern.ch. You can feel free to send me an email. I'm a very neurotic person, so I clean up my inbox all the time. But of course, if a lot of people send me emails, it takes a long time until I reply. But I always reply to every email, even if it takes some time. So feel free to contact me. Yeah.
So we're nearly to the end of our program, and it was so glad to be with you today. For some stuff, I'd like to request Ujjwal sir to please share his thoughts and express his gratitude for Jeff sir to be here today.
But I think you're muted, I think.
Oh, sorry for that.
No problem.
So thank you, Kripa, and thank you, Dr. Jeff, for taking this time to speak to our students. And on behalf of all the members of Civil Secondary School and all the students, I would like to thank you once again for your insightful presentation. And we truly appreciate the scientists like you who are willing to give your time and share your experience to the young students who want to pursue the higher educations in the field of science and technology. And I hope similar type of collaborations from you and help our students in the days to come.
Thank you so much. I can only second that. I hope so as well. And yeah, thank you so much again for the invitation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for the fantastic questions, and also thank you for the moderation of the questions. That was really brilliant. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I hope I answered most of your questions. I hope I raised some of your questions, because, you know, after such a talk, we should always leave such a meeting confused on a higher level. That's, you know, what we are hoping for. So, all right. Cool. Then I think we will come to an end. So thank you so much.